Welcome back to the Wise Up Podcast, your weekly dose of business wisdom as delivered to you by the members of Open Water. I'm your host, Chris Albrecht, and today I'm talking with Jossie Haines. She's an executive coach for women in tech, and we're going to be talking about this idea of portfolio careers. But first, let me welcome you to the show, Jossie. Thank you for being here.
Yes, I'm really excited to be here and chat with you today.
So, just to sort of set your bona fides real quick, you actually were, for a number of years, a software engineer and leading those teams. And then you transitioned into your own sort of coaching business. Give us just sort
Mhm.
of a quick recap of how you got to where you're at so that we can use it as a springboard into what portfolio careers are.
Absolutely. So I've spent 25 years in the tech industry, 23 of those in the corporate world, working on large scale consumer technology. I've led teams at Apple building Siri. I worked at Tile and was the VP of software engineering. I worked at Zynga, American Express. So I say that during my corporate life, I've built products that my teams have built that have been used by billions of people. And in July of 2022, I decided to turn my passion of retaining women in the tech industry into my full-time job. And so I started my own coaching practice, and now my focus is on coaching women leaders to architect a career they love and win the rewards they deserve.
Okay, that's great. So, careers they love. So, but it sounds like a portfolio career might not be sort of a typical career. Tell me what a
Absolutely.
portfolio career is.
Yes. So a portfolio career involves really pursuing multiple professional activities simultaneously rather than a single full-time job. And one of the reasons I'm talking about this is when I started my coaching practice, I started by also doing some advising on the side. I did tech advising, and at first I didn't love it. And so about 6 to 8 months into it, I had grown my coaching business. I didn't really need to do the advising anymore. And so I did coaching full time for about a year at that point. And then around April of this year, I actually had an opportunity land on my lap where I basically got to be a fractional engineering and product leader working on a small product. We're going to launch it hopefully in January of next year, related to something I had worked on in the past. And a former colleague reached out and said, "I'd love for you to do this." And I was like, "Oh, this sounds fun." And I get to use the engineering side of my brain. And I realized I had been missing using that side of my brain. And I love coaching women leaders. Like, it is my passion, it is my jam. I get so much emotional rewards from doing so. But I also have an engineer in me. And so creating kind of this portfolio career was the best of both worlds.
So, let's define it a little bit further. So, is a
Yeah.
portfolio career where you're working as like a fractional person for a number of different companies? Are you consulting? Like, how do you define it?
Yeah, so it's really doing multiple things that kind of take into account the different parts that you love. So for me, it's doing the coaching and doing the fractional role. For somebody else, it could be consulting and maybe advising and being on some boards or being involved in other entrepreneurial activities. Doing freelance work. I know some people who teach, right, as part of their portfolio careers. And so it's really this concept that instead of your income stream coming from, one big full-time job, that it's coming from different places and different professional experiences.
So, that as someone who has worked independently for a long time, like that makes sense to me, right? Like I've
Hmm.
done that a lot, but that's such a different sort of take than I guess what we grew up thinking, right? Like you get a job and you work
Hmm.
at that job and you grow at that company and maybe you change jobs or whatever, right? But you always have one.
Hmm.
How are you is this when you work with people, how are you introducing this idea to them? Are you mainly trying to get people comfortable with the idea that that's probably where they're at? Or is it something that people are trying to pursue more?
So I think it's a little bit of both, right? And I usually, I really look and see where people are at, right? And some people really want to pursue and continue a full-time career. And that's what we work on is how to create that. But what I see is sometimes I notice people they're dissatisfied with a full-time job, but they don't know what else there is out there. And so then that's when I started asking them, like, what is it that you really want to be doing? Right. I love asking if we could wave a magic wand and in 6 months you're doing whatever it is that you could be doing. And sometimes I even say, like, let's put money on the side for a second here. Right. Like, what really lights you up? And so often we're so focused on this like career advancement and following that traditional path that we've told is what success gets, what is success, that people haven't considered like you can actually build a very successful career doing multiple things. Now, it takes a different set of like self-motivation and networking. There's a whole lot of skills that you need to be building to be able to make this successful, but it is very possible and it really gives you flexibility.
So, who would you say a portfolio career is good for?
Yeah, so I find that this is good for people who have a bunch of experience, right? Like, I don't think this tends to work as well for people earlier in their career because it helps to have different interests, different things that you're good at that you can then leverage to make up the different parts of your portfolio career. I think it's good for people who are self motivated and are comfortable with uncertainty. You have to be really good at setting boundaries, blocking time, prioritizing, knowing when to say yes and when to say no. Um, you're looking for work-life balance and flexibility. Maybe you're looking to try new things and you're really excited. And you have those like diverse interests and skills. And you're really good at networking.
Okay, so on the counter side of that, then, who is a portfolio career not good for?
I think if you're looking for somebody to tell you what to do and you're not very self-disciplined, you struggle with time management, like it can be really hard to do this. If you're also looking for structure and stability, right? Like you are running your own business at the end of the day. So you have to wear all of the hats. You've got to wear the sales hat and the marketing hat and, doing your taxes and finances. And so you're basically being the CEO of your business, of your portfolio. And so though for people who find that to be completely overwhelming, this isn't good for. And also some people just need a little bit more consistency. They want a full-time job that brings them consistent income or benefits. Like this isn't going to work for people who need that.
So, as you're defining it, what's the difference between sort of career portfolio and consulting? Right? Is there a distinction in your mind?
So, to me, consultants usually work on a specific type of thing. And so, for example, you're a SEO consultant, right?
Mhm.
And you focus on SEO and you provide SEO services, right? To me, portfolio is okay. You are an SEO consultant, but then you also go and teach at a university. Maybe you actually take a fractional CMO role at the same time, right? So it's really kind of expanding beyond just one aspect of it. And so, for example, for me, I've got my coaching business, right? And that's very much focused on coaching women leaders. I also coach technology leaders too and do like group workshops and trainings. And then I'm also working as a fractional engineering leader and product leader. So, like in that side of the world, I'm basically putting on my like engineering leadership hat, creating roadmaps, architecting things, meeting with, the business folks. And then on the coaching side, I'm literally running basically a full-time coaching business as well. And so it's almost like wearing more hats because if you're consulting and your consulting is all kind of within the same bucket, there's less like mindset shifting too between different things.
So, as you are, as we are thinking about this, right? Then, because then it seems
Hmm.
also just one of the things people need to be prepared for is just hitting the bricks out there selling, and you've got to be able to sell into a lot of different places. So you,
Hmm.
right, have your coaching business, and so you're out there getting clients, and then you're also software engineer person, and so you're out there getting software engineer. So when you are trying to sort of bring these things together, like for your software role,
Hmm.
right, are you looking for something that's months long, or are you looking at something that's more project based? What, just for somebody who's thinking about this, right? How should they think about how to structure a portfolio career?
Right. And so the way I thought about it is so my coaching, I do like 3 or 6 month engagements with most of the folks that I work with, right? And so obviously like that's not short, but it's short enough that I know I'm going to have some turnover. So for the fractional role, I was really excited because it was something that's longer term, right? I've been doing it since April, and it's most likely going to go on at least another year, if not more. And so that to me was like, okay, this brings me some consistent income, and then I can really then focus on scaling the coaching business how I want to scale it without having to worry as much about how many clients I'm taking on, right? And so what I always recommend is like have one focus that you're currently prioritizing when you're working. Like don't try to be getting like more coaching clients and more, software roles all at the same time. Like have a focus for at least like 6 weeks of like, hey, this is what my focus is right now from the kind of sales, like how you're putting yourself out there side. And I mean, there's different ways to approach this as well. I mean, for me, I'm not actively looking for more software engineering fractional roles. Like I'm just looking for more coaching clients. So on LinkedIn, I only talk really about the coaching side of things, for example, right? If I was looking for more fractional roles, then I talk about that a little bit more. And so it's really about making sure people know everything you do because people are still going to show up to your world, even if you're not actively talking about it. But really knowing what you're prioritizing right now and also not trying to do too much at once, because especially because you're now doing like two, three, four potentially distinct things every time you're shifting. Going back to kind of like the consulting example, like you're shifting potentially a lot more from like what you're doing versus shifting between different consulting projects. And so you have to account for how much time that's going to take and mental bandwidth, not just time, too.
So how would somebody start? I guess they're in their mind going like, okay, I want to try this portfolio career thing out.
Hmm.
I have a lot of different interests, a lot of different expertise, and I want to do it. How do you recommend people start? What's the first couple of things they should do?
Yeah. So first, pick the first thing you want to be growing, right? And start networking with people because the way that most of the people I know who build their portfolio careers, it's all been through their network, right? They, at least some of the things and referrals, right? They're not actively trying to pursue every single part without have basically leveraging their network. So I think first is deciding, okay, these are the three things maybe I want to try over this year. This is the first one I'm going to prioritize. Let me do networking with folks who might be potential clients, might know clients who know. Or if you're like, I don't know if this is a good business idea, then start talking again to potential clients and listening to the words that they're using. Like, do they find this interesting? Like, what are the challenges they're speaking about? And making sure you're using the same language that they are when you're then communicating with other folks and looking for clients. And I think one of the things and that everyone needs to like a great reminder I always give people is it's actually your second degree connections who are the ones who are most likely to find you like roles or opportunities. And so making sure that your first degree connections know what you're doing, but really realizing it's the second degree ones who are most likely going to actually be showing up in your world.
That's a really good, that leads me to my next question, right? Which is like, how are you out there getting uh referrals and getting business, right? So you talked about LinkedIn and that's your
Hmm.
coaching side,
Yep.
right? But
Yep.
you're going to have to cycle through different phases probably,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
And as people are coming to your website, I guess you need to prioritize what your messaging is, like what your summary
Hmm.
is and all of that. But how do you suggest people go about, I mean, you said second, right? Like your second
Hmm.
connection, which I've heard elsewhere. It's like, it's not the person you know best, but the person that they know that like, oh,
Yep.
you should, that they can refer you to. Um, and so when people are thinking about this, right, because it's easy when you're consulting to go like, okay, I'm a writer. And so everything I do can focus on that. My website can be all about my writing and show my portfolio. And like the LinkedIn page can be all about that. But it seems like you need to be able to, if not diversify, then at least be able to sort of cycle through messaging. Do you have any
Hmm.
tips for that as you're out there sort of branding yourself in your portfolio career?
Yeah. And again, it's like, is there something you want to be first very visible for, right? So, for example, for me, like the coaching practice, I want that to be out there. I want that to be visible because I'm basically looking to build and get more coaching clients all the time and build a wait list for that. The fractional roles, at least with how I've set it up, is I most likely don't need another fractional role for another year or two. So I know, okay, maybe like 3 to 6 months before I potentially see my fractional role wrapping up, I'm going to start networking with folks in my network, but I don't need to be externally potentially talking about that on my LinkedIn all the time. The fact that I have built a network over, my career and I have lots of people in the industry who know what I have done really then helps just be like, hey, this is what I'm looking for in about 6 months. And just by putting out the word out there, like I'm able to build that side of the business without really having to actively write and be visible about it. And so I think it's about taking a step back and thinking about, okay, like let's say you want to go into consulting related to something that was your full-time job that you've done for 20 or 30 years. You most likely have a very large network of folks that you can connect with that could potentially help you land like a fractional role or know of opportunities. But then let's say you also want to do coaching or build a course. So for that, you might want to be a lot more visible. And so thinking about kind of like, okay, what parts of the business need me to be forward thinking and visible? And what parts of the business need me to be doing more like networking? And I can kind of do more as a back end. I still talk about on my LinkedIn profile every once in a while about my fractional role, just so people know that it's what I'm doing. And once people know that you do multiple things, nobody's going to get confused that, like, hey, you sometimes talk about engineering leadership and you sometimes talk about coaching. What can also be really powerful is if you have an email list, is to segment people as part of your welcome series when you're signing people up for your email list. Ask them what they're interested in, and then that way you can send them messaging related to what their specific topic. So if you have a variety of different things, then you can say like, oh hey, are you interested more in like fractional engineering leadership? Or are you really interested more in coaching? And that way you can really help and not send them information that they may not want. But I think this kind of goes back to what I was saying is like, it's helpful if not everything is like this front facing, like I need to promote it actively. It's nice if certain parts of it are more back end so that you're not having to create multiple profiles. So obviously on LinkedIn, you can only have one profile, but if you were doing something where it would make sense to do it on like Facebook or Instagram, for example, there you can have multiple profiles. So for example, I know somebody who's a therapist and she has a therapy profile, which is like talking about her therapy directly. And then she has a business of therapy profile because she also talks about how to run a therapy business successfully online. And so she has different profiles for those things. And so it's also kind of thinking about, all right, is there a way to potentially market it as different profiles or different lanes? And people still know, like, oh, she talks about the fact that she does this business of therapy thing, but it's not what she actively talks about on her therapy profile, for example.
I want to drill down just a little bit on LinkedIn. And so, what do you use it for? I mean, so let me rephrase that. I know what you use it for because you just said it.
Mm-hmm.
But what I mean is, like, how do you use it, right? Because I
Yeah.
find LinkedIn can be so finicky, where
Yes.
some days things seem to reach a lot of people. Other days, it's like you basically dropped it in a hole and no one ever saw it, right? And so,
Yep.
for you, are you putting up? Are you like reacting to articles? Are you pushing? Pushing is sort of a strong word here, but are you sort of forwarding with like, oh, these are some ideas, or this is
Hmm.
services? Like, what's sort of your mix of content? What have you found works for you on LinkedIn?
Yeah. So I'm switching up my strategy a little bit right now with LinkedIn and kind of how I'm marketing things. So I'll talk about that. But for about 2 years, I was posting on LinkedIn anywhere between 3 and 5 days a week, averaged around 4 days a week. What I found out works really well is story based posts, things where you're being vulnerable. Posts where you're selling do not do as well on LinkedIn from an engagement perspective. And so what I would do is focus mostly on story based posts, educational posts, and then when I was trying to promote something, then I would intermix some sales posts between them. And so that tended to work the best. You posting it around the same time every day works. LinkedIn, unlike the other platforms that want you to actually post multiple times a day, LinkedIn tends to prefer you post about once a day and then that you comment on other people's stuff around that same time that you post. So being sure that you're not just posting, but also reacting and commenting on other folks' posts. One of the things that they're really pushing right now, if you have access to it, is they have their AI generated content that they're asking people to their add ideas to. And so that is what will get you like some of those top voice badges on LinkedIn. And so if you can answer one of those questions, if you're being prompted to answer those about once a week, actually also seems to help with the visibility. I notice that if I keep up with those, my posts seem to get more visibility. Um, I find that LinkedIn works really well for nurturing. It doesn't work as well for like, I want to do a sale right now. Let me post a bunch on LinkedIn and sell. Like, it does not work for that. What I've been doing along with posting, which I think has been helpful, is really building my LinkedIn network. So, along with posting, I also connect with about 25 people from my ideal clients every week and send them, an outreach message saying like, "Hey, I love connecting with women in tech." And then I usually send them a few follow-up messages around. Right now what's been working really well for me has been sending them a survey and saying, "Hey, would you mind, I'm creating more content for women leaders in the tech industry. I would love to know what's top of mind for you. If you don't mind, I'd like to send you a quick three minute, like I literally copy the questions into LinkedIn so they can literally say like 1B, 2C, like it's 3 questions, multiple choice, but that's been building engagement. And then I'm getting more folks in my network as well who are basically my ideal clients. So it's really, I see LinkedIn more as like a longer nurturing process than somewhere where you can immediately like flip a switch and just get sales. What I'm also pivoting more towards, and I'm actually kind of in the setup process for this, I haven't fully done this yet, is moving more towards long form content. So I'm going to be focusing more on SEO on my website, doing more articles. Actually, want to launch my own podcast, hopefully at the beginning of next year, and leveraging more long form because that's kind of my passion. That's what I really enjoy. And so I think that's the other thing as you're sitting here thinking about like building your portfolio career, right? I think the hardest part about marketing is there's a million different ways you can market, right? And and yes, being on social media can be useful and can be important, but it's not the only way to get yourself out there. And so I think part of it is really taking a step back and realizing like, what is it that I love to do, right? Is it, for visibility? Do I love to write? Do I want to write long form articles on a weekly basis? Do I want to be creating podcast episodes or YouTube videos? Do I want to be speaking on public stages? Do I want to be doing podcast guesting, right? All of these are very successful ways of building any business, right? But especially a portfolio one where you really do need to be visible and thinking about, okay, what is it that I really enjoy doing? So you don't just wake up every week going like, okay, now I have to write another 4 LinkedIn posts and I hate it.
All right. Well, I certainly have enjoyed talking with you today, Jossie Haines. You are an executive coach for women in tech. If people wanted to find out more about your career portfolio or your coaching services, where should they go?
Yes. So obviously follow me on LinkedIn and also visit my website at josiehaines.com. And one of the things I have there for any women leaders in tech who might be listening is a free guide on the 8 pillars that are needed to rise to the top of tech leadership.
All right. We'll put those links in the show notes, but we should have people know that it's Jossie, Jossie, Haines, Haines.com.
Yep.
All right. Jossie Haines, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was so nice being here. Bye.